just because you live in a small space doesn't mean you can't be homesteading. I'm achieving more on this 1/6 of an acre, and that 1/6 of an acre actually has a house, a shed, and concrete verandas and everything. So there's not actually much land left. So it's not actually homesteading on a 1/6 of an acre, really, is it? I'm not sure how much land is left after all of that, but I came off 1,000 acres, so it seemed like I had no land at all. So I'm going to show you what is possible in a small space, what I'm growing, and it might give you some ideas on what you can do in your small space too. I'm Elisa, and welcome to Moat Cottage Homesteading.
19 years ago when I first moved in, there was only a handful of plants in the garden, so I had to put in all the garden beds and add plants over the years.
This is a pink grapefruit, and I've planted this probably, I think it was put in the garden, I don't know, maybe about 4 years ago, I'm not sure. But I did have it in pots for about 10 years before that, because this is a rental, so I wanted all my citrus to go with me if I moved. But I stayed here so long, I decided they had to really go in the garden, and if I did move, when I eventually do move, I'll just have to start again with the fruit trees that I've planted in the garden. But in the meantime, I've got my money's worth out of the citrus trees that I have planted in the garden, so I haven't really lost out.
This is my favourite citrus. This is a Tangelo, and it has to be fenced off because the ducks do like to eat its leaves, and it's just a little bit too small to be out of reach at this point. And it's taking a little while to grow because, as you can see, it's quite shaded, and that's being shaded by the palm tree that I haven't cut down yet. This lemon tree was really sick when I moved in, so I decided that I would try and save it instead of pulling it out and replacing it. It had grass growing all the way up to the trunk, and it had diseased leaves. So I removed all the grass from around the base, put stones around it in a big circle so that I could put all sorts of poop and manure and compost inside the rocks, and that would feed the plant over the years. And then I put a water tank in just over there, which means I can place duck pools around the base of the tree, and I let the water that the ducks have used go onto the tree. So it's getting plenty of water all through the summer and the warmer months. And it's worked really well. These lemons are fantastic. This is a Granny Smith apple. It's grafted on, and that was from when I was doing a grafting class a couple of years ago. And this is my second Granny Smith apple. This one's a bit smaller, this apple tree. There's 2 of my 3 compost bins, and then there's the maggot buckets there. In the corner of the garden I have my mulberry tree. It grows quite considerably fast, so I do have to prune it back each autumn. I usually take about 12 feet off it and mulch up the wood and use it for mulch on the walkways. There's plenty of fruit on it, and we've been getting rain, so hopefully they fatten up and get really juicy. And underneath the mulberry tree I have plenty of curry plants which are just about to go to flower, and we're going to have beautiful yellow flowers on them. Curry plant is great for using in cooking, and as soon as it rains, which it's raining now, it smells like curry in the whole garden. As with curry plants, I grow a lot of lavender and rosemary, and I use them in making salves and heat sacks, as well as for pest control in the poultry coop. All of my lavender, rosemary and most of my curry plants were all cuttings that I've taken myself. So every year I just take cuttings of all 3 of these plants, because then when things die in the garden, I just pop them in the spaces when spaces come up. I use rosemary in focaccias as well as in lamb dishes.
Next to the mulberry tree I have my white nectarine. I love it. It's beautiful, sweet fruit, but unfortunately it's a magnet for the fruit flies. So even when I cover it, they seem to find a way to get in. Underneath I have a different lavender. This one's one that goes into seed. So I have a lot of them in random spots because it self-seeds in the garden. Moving up further, I have elderberries. I started with 2 little plants that I got in the mail, and I planted them in. They were about this big, and I think it's 2 years ago that was, and I've taken cuttings from them, and now I have 10 plants altogether in different spots in the garden. So you don't have to buy a lot of plants to be able to get plants. If you have friends with established gardens, you can always ask them for herbs. When they're in seed, ask for the seeds if they've got extra, because usually when you've got an established garden, you do have extra seeds of some things that do really well, and you can go around and take cuttings in their gardens as well. And herbs are a really good thing to take cuttings of to get extra plants, especially when you're starting out with nothing. I hacked them right back this winter, and now they're already probably, what's that, nearly 6.5, 7 feet. This cutting here was taken earlier on in the year, and it's going to probably be up to the top of the fence by the end of summer. So it doesn't take long for them to grow, and that's a free plant. The homestead is a work in progress, so there's always things changing. You find gaps in the garden that you need to fill, and which is a good thing because we're always looking for space. But you also find things that you're growing that you decide that you don't want to grow. So you have to make the decisions to take them out. So we've got a few changes happening at the moment. The first one is that we've taken down 3 of the cocoa palms because they're quite dangerous. I was finding that they got too high, they got out of control. I couldn't prune them anymore. So when they were dropping just their seed pods, they're just so heavy, and I really didn't want to risk anyone getting smacked in the head with one of those, whether it be a person or a duck or a chicken. So we got those removed. Damon got the axe out and he sorted that out for me. Another reason we got rid of them was that their roots were spreading out shallow under the ground. What will happen is once the roots die down, I will be able to plant fruit trees there, so it's not a bad thing. The other reason I had to get rid of those was because they were blocking the solar panels as well, and the more sun I can get on my solar panels, the better.
Damon's going to use the straw bales to make a platform. That way he can get up high to cut down the palm trees in sections, because they're so big, if you cut them down at the base then they would crash into the fence and that wouldn't be good. So he's going to do it in sections.
We've still got one that needs to go, but it's too big for Damon to axe down, so it's got to be done professionally, and I'm not sure when that will get to happen, but at this point it's not on the calendar.
This is back when I first moved in, and I'd already put in a little vegetable garden, and then it grew to this. And then it evolved because I had put rocks around it and a little fence with some star pickets because it was temporary. And then it evolved again to be concreted in posts and proper wire, and I built the gate. So it's a nice secure facility so the dogs can't get in it. And in here I have all my garlic and my annuals mostly. I do have yacons in here which are a perennial, and the nasturtiums as well, but this is the end of my winter garden. So this was in spring, this was a month ago, and I've got the kale, snow peas, Brussels sprouts, beetroot, carrots, turnips, silver beet. And next to the annual vegetable garden I have the courtyard, which is all pots, because when you water the vegetable garden there's excess water that spills over when you've got the sprinklers going in the summer, so you may as well make use of that and put pots around the outside of it. There's comfrey, mint, a fig tree, nasturtiums, sunflower, hyssop, mint, rhubarb, stinging nettles, borage. That sunflower was self-seeded. That's why it's so far in advance, because it self-seeded and started growing in the middle of winter. On this side I have more stinging nettles. I have some chrysanthemums for picked flowers for the house. The nasturtiums are growing away from the light, which is really freaky, but I love it because they're actually growing in the veggie garden, but instead of taking up space in the veggie garden, they're growing through. And I've got strawberries in the strawberry pot, echinacea, spring onions, and then I've got a feijoa, which is what I want to plant where one of the palm trees is. And then I have my quince. I finally got a quince tree, so I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait to get that in the ground next winter. This was a few months after I moved in, and I put up a temporary fence so I could grow 2 passion fruits up it. And about 10 years later, when it was time to replace the passion fruit, I decided to put a proper fence in that was Rio and concrete and the whole thing, and it's a metre in front of the fence where the passion fruit was originally, so that I get both sides of the passion fruit. So that's why I grow one side of passion fruit and the other side is my male kiwi fruit. This is a female kiwi fruit, and I've just extended the fence yesterday, so it's just been wound up into it and it will just take over for the summer. So I'll have beautiful kiwi fruits in autumn. This is actually my perennial garden, and as well as having my 2 female kiwi fruit plants, it's got globe artichoke, which I'm ready to pick some of them, and some are going to flower. This is one of the logs from the cocoa palm, and Damon's chopping them up and he's put them in my perennial garden beds so that I can use them for my raised pumpkins, because I grow pumpkins in the same spot every year, which is not ideal. But what I do, instead of using the soil, I build the soil up with new stuff each year. And so now I've got these barriers for the built up garden beds. So we're making good use of the cocoa palm trunks, and none of it's going to waste. Also in this garden bed, I have a lime tree, a mandarin and a lemon, and around the whole fence line I have Jerusalem artichokes, which will grow up to about 10 foot high and give me plenty of privacy for the summer. I've also got garlic, horseradish and comfrey. Comfrey root is great for knitting broken bones, and the leaves are good for making comfrey tea, which is a plant fertiliser. Nikki doesn't live here anymore. She moved out last year and she's living off grid in a van in the bush, and she's come back to paint that bit of blue gutter that I can't get to, and she's cleaning the gutters that I can't reach. So that's really cool that she's helping me out, and much appreciated. This old water tank, which you probably saw wasn't in my courtyard, because it's so old, it was time to take it down. Damon took it down for me. I was able to grind it down and make a flower pot out of it. So I filled it up with all the compost from the duck coop, and over the winter I was growing all sorts of things in here to see what would grow, because it's a really tricky spot. It's dark, it's shady, it gets no direct sunlight in winter at all, and then in summer it will get 46-degree temperatures and boiling hot west sun. So the thyme's doing well, the borage is doing really well, the chives aren't getting enough light because of probably the borage. The dill's doing well in here. So I was just seeing what would grow. I've also got bins around, the metal bins, and this is a Vietnamese mint, which is not getting enough sunlight either, so I'll have to move it. The sage is doing really well, the nasturtium's doing well, and this tiny little seedling is one of those trees that got cut down next door in the paddock in the winter, which I was really sad about. And then this is marjoram, and it's growing very well. It's only fairly new, so I'm really looking forward to harvesting that. I've planted in 3 more rosemaries this year, which were cuttings of course, and those pavers were all free, and I've got heaps of them. They line the fence lines to stop snakes getting in and the dogs digging out or anything like that. The kumquat tree has been fantastic. These grow fantastic in pots, and you get enough fruit to make plenty of jams, so they're definitely worth having. Behind the vegetable garden, this is where I have 7 elderberry plants. They're the ones I took cuttings from this year. You can't see them all because the Jerusalem artichokes have grown up and are starting to overtake them, but they'll all grow. And up in the back there I've got some pumpkins growing as well. Now this is the crabapple tree, and it still looks just as beautiful 19 years later. My glass house has got all sorts of things ready to go in to the summer annual garden. Under this net I have youngberries growing. They're just starting to fruit now, so I can see there's a lot of berries in here.
and they've just got to grow nice and juicy. Because I have ducks and chickens free range in my garden, I do have to have some things fenced off so that they don't get eaten. Things like my oregano would get eaten. You can see on this side of the fence it's kept pruned quite nicely, which is fine. And then the other side is for me to be using. I do leave spots in the garden for the chickens to do their dust baths. You can't have all the space for your good plants. You do have to let them have their areas because that's how they keep clean and get any parasites off them.
In the poultry coop I have a bay tree in a pot. I've had this for over 20 years, so I bought it when it was tiny. So I've definitely got my money's worth out of this one. But it's not really a plant that you would plant in a small garden. The mint garden bed is also in the poultry run. It has its own garden bed because mint is quite invasive. But rodents hate it, so it's a good thing to grow around the poultry coop. And it's also delicious. I do have a lily-pilly up the end that I'm hoping will grow into a big tree, and I have a self-seeded parsley as well as some horseradish. This is one of my aloe vera patches. It's fantastic for burns, and the ducks don't seem to eat it, so it grows really well here. Everything that comes out of the garden gets eaten fresh or preserved for later. Some things are medicinal and some things are for food, and then others are for crafts. And that includes all sorts of meats that we get hunting or growing ourselves, like the ducks. I've still got my fermented carrots out on the shelf. Because it has been so cold here, they're still going. I probably should have put them in the room with the fire. This video has been crazy to make. The weather has been insane. It is freezing cold here. There's only 2 weeks till summer, and we're in Australia where we usually get 40+ degree temperatures quite often. So it is crazy that I've been wearing my ski jacket 2 weeks before summer starts. And it's been raining, we've had hail twice, and the sun will come out, I'll go out to film, and then it will start raining again and blowing winds and freezing, and it's just been crazy. And tonight's going to get down to about 2 or 3 degrees, so I'm hoping the summer plants don't get frost. It doesn't get too cold and get frosty, so we'll have to just see how that works out because they're too big to be covered by the things I usually cover at the start of the season when they're little. Well, that looks like a sign of peace. So I would say the next video I film should be easier to make. That's pretty beautiful, that rainbow. I hope you're safe and well where you are. Thanks for hanging out with me, for liking, subscribing, and all the comments and the shares. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.